is as a board member, I'm always asking questions about money, okay? And I'm going to ask also about how in the world in one summer do you get, in 5 areas, do you get teachers?
They were online coursework that they did online through the Central Ohio ESC. They were online courses.
Online.
They were like 5 weeks, they took, like, maybe they could take 3 the first 5 weeks, and then there was one that ran another 5 weeks. It might have been like 6 or 7 weeks,
And
yeah.
normally, MAC courses in college are normally 5 to 6 weeks. You can do a full course in an average college, whether you go in class or you go online. You can do it in 6 weeks.
They were online courses.
Okay, and then, how much?
How much it cost, I couldn't say how much.
The district paid for it though, right?
Do you know how
Yeah.
much, the district did pay for it,
Yeah,
yes. The
okay.
district did pay.
Okay, I'll find that.
Laura, would you ask if we can get those numbers, please?
How much it cost?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
You got it, okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay, so
Oh,
now
actually, I forgot you're over there.
Well,
okay,
what
so
is
now
it?
I'm gonna move on to the next point.
Mhm.
And that is for, we're back on topic on special education now. We're going back to what data, because you know in that IEP, there are goals. And those goals have to be measured. So you just can't put anything broad in there. So there's a page in the IEP, and I have one over there, but all of you all know what it looks like. And they have to be measurable. So my question was, what data is used to measure the present level of academic achievement? So before, we only had class grades. We had report cards, right? But now, as I mentioned earlier, we have DIBELS, we have NWEA, we have all of that. So, in my example, I have my grandson who's getting, now they do the honor roll by GPA and all of that, right? And I know this because I do the certificates at our school. My grandson is getting honor roll, again, for the second grading period. When the bag report comes home, it says not on track, not proficient, and below benchmark. The report card is not matching. So the question that I bring up is, which one you want me to believe? I'm leaning towards believing in the computerized work, and so I'm thinking teachers are giving grades. And if we just go on the grades, then are you really on the roll? Because it says on there to pass the 3rd grade reading test, not on track. So how are you getting the A in language arts? I'm not getting that. But that's something that I'm working with the teacher and his inclusion teacher on that.
So let me add something to that before we go to Ms. Taylor, and when you finish your last question. So one of the things that I called Mr. Larry Ellis, the union president, because next Thursday we're doing Title I. So you don't have to be in that seat. However, it comes back to, this comes up in everything, right? Because we know that historically, and there's a big discussion going on in colleges across the entire United States at this point, all 3,000 or some 3,000 that I'm aware of, about grade inflation. The average grade point average in the late 50s was about 2.5, and now it's about 3.10. And almost 50% upgrades that college students are getting are A's. So there's a question about grade point average. I know from a case study that I was doing, and then got some hard, what used to be anecdotal data, got hard data, that I could look at the bell curve, apply state 9 to it, and it shifts to the right, which is what happens to her child and her GPA. It shifts to the left when you're looking at, are they on hard ground where they're going to be expected to learn. Then we pair that information with the fact of how many kids participate in the ACT, or the SAT, and then how many of those kids are remediation free, ready? So if you look at a 50% participation rate in taking the ACT or SAT, and you wind up seeing a 2% remediation free, that's a broad spectrum. And so that's kind of where this is. So this is the opening salvo. Not that you're going to answer this all tonight, because we're going to expect the Title I is going to deal with it, curriculum and assessment is going to have to deal with it, because it is a major, major issue in terms of what is the integrity of the GPA. And that was the reason I called Ms. Ellis, because I felt that NEA put out a document, a position paper, is 8 pages long, and part of that position paper has to do with all of these other things. But one of the things that we were definitely want to make sure that they're engaged in that conversation is this whole issue of GPA. Do you feel, people say they're pressured to teach to the test. That sounds standardized stuff. They say they're pressured to give good grades. That's on the other side. So you, as a community and as families who need to be more sophisticated in their understanding of pedagogy and what's going on in curriculum and assessment, and whether or not they're in alignment with the state, and do these things matter, and if they're in alignment and one masters the material at whatever level, that the truth in education is to get the real truth. Where is my child? Whether it's grade point average, or whether it's in criterion reference material, or whether it's standardized material. Where is my child? We don't want the teacher in the classroom feeling pressured to teach to the test or to give a grade. But when it does happen, that you find a teacher, and we had one specific example that we were told we could use, and we will use it later this month, where a known principal wanted a known teacher to adjust the grade. They didn't say change the grade, I don't think that, but adjust the grade. And the person stood on principle, did not, and wrote it up, and we simply have a copy of it. But my point to you as a larger group, that really is a concern. And if there is, as Dr. Robinson alluded to earlier, she spoke of Special Olympics and she spoke of the regular Olympics. And we know that those are two separate Olympics. So if parents have to be told that within the context of the Special Olympics, and I'm gonna liken that to special education, that your child is truly this, but that scale in relationship to the regular ed scale is a difference of this. That's gonna give the parents more to work with, because they know the truth. They won't say, my child is getting all A's, has an IEP, has specific difficulties, but they're going to college. And the way that I got interested in that was at P. Rossberry. A parent came to us, we called a meeting of all the parties concerned, including the 2 intervention specialists. And the intervention specialist proceeded to explain to us in detail how well the child was doing. The parents were very happy. My particular partner, because it was a young female child, I normally have a female with me because I don't have enough estrogen to sense those kind of things. And she was able to pick up something. And so she asked me to ask the intervention specialist to let her know they were done. When they were done, she asked if she could speak to the principal and to the parents. And then what she said was, what grade level is this child performing these grade point averages that you just gave us?
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, it was 5 grade levels below because the child was in the 9th grade. And the mother broke down and started crying in the meeting because they were prepping her for medical school. And she was sure with what was going on, and I'm saying 2 intervention specialists, not 1, was working with the child. So we're trying to get some of that out of the way so that we can have those honest discussions, we can deal with those things. And if the parent needs to know that the child is on a different scale, Special Olympics versus regular Olympics, that they're not gonna do the 100-yard dash in the same. They're not gonna do the decathlon or the heptathlon at the same time. It's not gonna happen, it's different. But the parent needs to know that. That's the truth that they need in order to be able to help their child. Because once they're out of your system, the parent still has them in their system. And then all of a sudden, every agency, including the prison system, has them on lockdown. And that's a lot of, Mr. Brown he's here, he's in and out of 2 or 3 prisons. I just spoke with the head of the prison tonight before Dr. Robinson coming in, we're going into another prison, and we see the end result inside the prison. So that's why it's so important that we videotape this stuff, that people understand it. It can go out to people, they can get a copy and go online, they'll be able to do all of the above. But I would ask that this goes back to the system, from you to the power structure, that's something that we really have to have a discussion about, that we really need to deal with. And at first, it's not pretty, but if we're doing it for the right reason, and the integrity is there, and the truth is there, and the experts can explain it and open up to parents so that they can accept it and deal with it, the child can deal with it. It's just the question of, do they know? Because if they walk out of school, and my daughter-in-law, it hurt my heart, but my daughter-in-law was a 4.0 student. With a full ride to one of the best universities in California, and didn't get past the first semester. And it was one of the reasons we sued the 8th largest school district in the nation, because they were not delivering a quality education. And it was for that reason. So I'm just saying to you, from Mr. Overson to Lori to you to all the team, that's really a discussion you need to have inside, because for a long time, a lot of stuff has just been allowed to go on and was hidden. But that's why we wanted to do this, really, and to have the community understand we are discussing these things, and you'll be discussing them inside. So, Dr. Rogers.
So when we had this discussion with Lori and the team, you gave us some really good answers. But then I went back and I looked at his IEP, and I looked at those goals. So what I would tell a parent today, if that question came up, what is the difference between and Mr. Schubert, you can follow me on this, what's the difference between the grades and the thing according to the IEP? That's why it's important to pay attention to the IEP, because the IEP has those measurable goals. And so that is what we're gonna go by to see, regardless of what his grades say, regardless of what that test says, he's working towards those goals. And Ms. Rhodes knows those goals, and so she's giving him the work, and she's like telling me, he's getting it, adding those double digits, and he sent that homework home, and I gave him that homework to do, and he better bring that homework back, because she's familiar with those goals and what we're working to achieve. So when we look at the IEP, and sometimes we gotta think outside the mold of regular ed.
Right, and you gotta look at those methods for measuring progress that are in that box on the side.
Yes,
that I
yes,
talked about, right?
yes. So sometimes, so when I see those papers, sometimes I gotta remember he's on the IEP, so I gotta get the bag report, I gotta get the report card, and I got to get the IEP, and I gotta view all of them
And then you gotta ask
together.
the teacher to see the data and the progress report and then the data for those methods for each goal that are in that box that I showed you.
Right, and so we can't look at when we have a child that's on the IEP, you can't look at one piece in isolation. You have to look at all of the pieces together and see how they work together. So when I go into Mr. Schubert's office with all of my paperwork, I need to have all the pieces together, and I just can't tell him, well, why is the teacher giving him this grade, and why did it, because for the teacher's method, he could be getting those grades. And what they said is, now he has an inclusion teacher that's there with him. Now, when he's on the computer, she might not be there, and at one time, he was supposed to be doing reading, and he was on math. And so his score was gonna be a little bit lower, but then when I look overall, he has improved since September. So that's just one day, 1.8